Hi, friends. It's Sarah. Um, I wasn't sure if I was going to make a video. I wasn't sure my voice would add anything. Um, but I'm gonna try. So before I get into anything, I need to say off the bat that I condemn terrorism. Uh, I know as a Middle Eastern person, I need to say that. I need to say that I don't support Hamas. Um, and I'm gonna put here, I do not support terrorism. And so because I know that if I don't say that enough, yeah, we've been here before. And if you were able to talk without doing whole disclaimer thing, that's that's kind of a privilege that Middle Eastern folks don't have. Um, so yeah, I do not support. I don't support violence. I mean, sometimes it's absolutely necessary, but I really always see it as a last resort. I mean, I was raised to be a pacifist, very much so. My father actually, he left Egypt because he would have had to go for automatic military service when they were at war with Israel uh, in the 70s. And he believes very strongly in do no harm as a doctor. So he uh, sort of a political refugee. Um, yeah, kind of had to sneak out of the country and wasn't allowed back until uh, Sadat made peace with Israel, and then pardoned people like my dad. And we went back in 1981. My dad was a huge admirer of Sadat, and while we were there, he was assassinated. Which is one of those. History is strange. Um, my mom's family is Quaker, uh, so yeah, um, peace is an important value. Um, I was fascinated by the in 1995. I was 15. The first political thing I really paid attention to was the talks with Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin, who I really admired. Like my dad did Sadat, like someone who had been a man of war, dedicating his life to peace. Um, and he suffered a similar fate to Sadat. Uh, here's the thing about the situation. People don't want to, a lot of people are sort of rejecting that it's nuanced and complicated. And the thing is that it is like insanely complicated. It is a story of many truths. And yet it's also incredibly simple because the both of these faiths, and for those of us who are, I'm an atheist humanist, killing people is wrong. Like at some point, for all the complicated, what is happening now is wrong. What is happening now is ethnic cleansing, it's collective punishment. And it didn't start on October 7th. And it isn't about a conflict between Arabs and Jews. I don't know if you're seeing it, but look up if you're not, then look at all the amazing Jewish people who are protesting in support of the Palestinian people and who are calling for an end to this. And there are there are forces in Israel who seek peace, but their voices don't get heard. Um, there's one of the complicated truths is that the electoral system is a mess. Um, and people who are ruthless, strong negotiators are very good at taking power in the mess that is their electoral system. And I know that, you know, electoral systems around the world are kind of a mess. We had hoped to make Canada's better, and then Trudeau failed us on that one. But it is a particularly notorious chaos, the way that the Israeli system works. And Netanyahu is a very shrewd operator and has held a lot of power for a long time. And he has wanted to commit genocide for a long time. I I was so clear to say I condemn Hamas, but why does he let it be funded? Because he does. He has for years. He and other of the Likud party have let money and resources be funneled to Hamas, because they are very much in control of what gets in and out of Gaza. And the reason is because the the organ that the organizers who used to lead were left wing and were more sympathetic, um, and uh, Hamas was capable of undermining them, and so they let money go, and there are times when they let Hamas prisoners go, and like I know it sounds like a conspiracy, but it's not something that's elaborate. They just let it happen. Um, it's like that's a lot of why there isn't another group that the Palestinians can be represented by, not in Gaza. It's just um, Hamas is sort of the only game in town, and they are not good. They're not good people. Um, when you want to support the Palestinian people, you don't want to support Hamas. Um, they're kind of like if you gave like Alex Jones or Glenn Beck um, actual weapons to give to their followers. um, like they're the kind of people who tell hopeless young people um, that here's a path to glory. Here's who's responsible for everything that sucks in your life, and here's a way to do something about it. It is like it's like the school shooters and the sarcastic terrorists. and the people who threaten um, and the people who threaten Target for having rainbows. It's like it's and yeah, the Gaza is mostly full of children, and they are angry and they have no hope because life expectancy is abysmal. And someone gives them a target, and yeah, um, because there isn't a system or a way to make peace because the people in charge are not interested in peace. And they don't have to be because they're supported by America, by Britain, by all the Western hegemony. Um, and the the thing is, like, this is part of the. It's so complicated. Like this, it is a colonial project, but not in the same way that Canada is a colonial project, where there was another population that came and supplanted that, you know, had no connection to the land. There is a historical connection with the diaspora people to the land. And there's also been Jewish people, Jewish Palestinians um, who have lived in the region for functionally forever, as there are the people who are now Muslim before Islam was founded, um, and there were Christians there. Um, you know, there wasn't an idea. There wasn't always an idea of Palestine because nation states are a 19th century invention that I kind of think were a bad idea. Um, but the people, the people have been there in the land, cultivating the land. The people of the three faiths. Um, and they were living in the land under colonialism. You know, the borders exist because a Frenchman and an Englishman, Sykes and Picot, drew them when they were carving up what had been Ottoman land during the First World War. They drew all the straight lines for their own convenience. Um, and the colonialism didn't even start when the English took over. Um, like the Ottoman was more empire than colonizers. They weren't really interested in controlling the people apart from getting taxes, but they also they were kind of absentee landlords. They didn't do much about infrastructure or anything. And part of the reason for that is because the Britain and France were operating as kind of predatory lenders for a long time. It was really important to keep uh, the Ottoman Empire both there and weak as a buffer with Russia. Um, yeah, and and so like the West has been part of creating these conditions for the entire modern era. And when they did start directly being colonizing the region, they operated on a system of divide and conquer. Um, that's how the British Empire worked. My my British side worked in was a part of this system in India. Um, yeah, my grandfather, my English grandfather, rejected all of it. Um, we've always been is you have to reckon with the reality of the past and the ways that it's feeding into the future, because I I wonder if peace would have been possible if the outside powers had not interfered so much. Like even when the Ashkenazi began coming back um after World War II, maybe if Britain hadn't been doing the divide and conquer and the like, we're just going to give you the land and trust that you'll share it. I don't know. Maybe we wouldn't be here. This is the thing. Like the reason you have to reckon with the complicated as well as the simple is because the simple is it has to stop. The complicated is how on earth does it stop when it is when the divisions are so deep and the politics are so complicated. And I didn't even talk about America, bloody America. Biden, the man who is president now, once said of Israel that if it didn't exist, America would have to create it because it serves the purpose for America to have such a friendly nation, read basically America's colony, in the region. It serves their purpose so much. And so, like, you wonder why he is lining up so much behind Israel. And it's partly because they need Israel, but also if you actually look at what's happened since the 7th, there was a terrorist attack that was genuinely devastating and a massively unbalanced, hugely powerful and influential country went after a small bunch of, of terrorists by bombing a whole region. If America admits that what Israel is doing is wrong, it has to admit that what happened after 9/11 is wrong. And I I don't know that they're capable of doing that. Like the hegemony. And now I know some of you are able to recognize that perhaps. And also like there's can they reckon with the fact that to so many the people who are in closer proximity to whiteness are the people that they are treating as human, and the people who are further away from it, they're okay with being called animals. When I look at the footage of the people in Gaza, they look like my family. That's the experience that Middle Eastern people are having right now. They look like my family. And it brings up a lot of painful memories when people who look like your family are dying. And other people won't treat them as full humans because they talk funny and they're dark. I will tell you a story that it is a difficult story to tell. when I was 22 in 2002, um, I was in a spot in the club that I had been going to since I was 17. It was a safe place for me, or so I thought. And someone I thought of as my best friend, who in fact had been the boy that I loved, first boy that I loved, said in front of me, knowing my ethnicity, having met my father, who is dark skinned and sounds like Omar Sharif, he said around me that he wanted to, how do I say this and not get dinged by the algorithm? He wanted to join the army to unalive heads and sand word with a hard R. And when, okay, I didn't object, I slapped him. I know I said that I don't believe in violence. It was not the right thing to do. But it was also, it was, it was instinct. I didn't have control over myself and I should have, but I was 22 and in shock. And he said I shouldn't be upset because I don't look like one of them. And when we tried to talk it out later when he was sober, he said that I didn't count because I'm light skinned. I so are a lot of Middle Eastern people, by the way. You just don't know what a Middle Eastern woman looks like if she doesn't have her head covered. Uh, and you'd think that that story that guy was, you're imagining like a clueless white guy. He was actually indigenous and had been a victim of the 60s scoop. So what was happening uh, was one person's racial trauma meeting another. And so it makes sense that for him, skin color was the thing because, yeah, I don't know. I understand now that what I understand now, 20 years on, is that I will never understand. And that's part of the feature of racial trauma. And so much of what's happening is about two people's racial trauma, meaning because, or many people's, because there are multiple responses. I see the racial trauma is in the Holocaust survivor descendants who are saying "not in my name," and that is amazing to see. Um, and there's also the people who, to who never again to them means reacting in this way to this one strike, this one terrorist strike, and that and they're in their racial trauma and they can't even hear the things like that Netanyahu basically let this happen because he's been looking for an excuse. If you let Hamas be funded, eventually they were going to do something. And and so the complicated is that there's all this trauma and all this pain and all this complicated, complicated um, stuff Um, you know, those poor people at the concert should be home living their lives just as much as I think it's around 700 children who've died in Gaza in the recent days should be home with their parents and should be looking forward to growing up and having a life. But they live in an open air prison, except now they don't live there anymore. So there is so much complicated. And there is also like the truth that it's great that people are speaking up in defense of Palestine, but some of them are not being careful and they're letting anti Semitic people stand with them, or they're repeating anti Semitic chants because the river to the sea thing, that is a call for genocide the other way. So don't say that, because it's not a choice of who gets genocided. That is not, that cannot be the way we exist as humans. I I don't know. I've been following this situation since 95, since I was so fascinated by the peace negotiations. So sad when they fell apart. I remember I had done a presentation on it at school, and so the teacher from that class came to me the morning that Rabin had been shot and told me quietly what had happened because he knew I admired him and he admired him, and we had a little cry. Um, and I don't know. I've been following it, and what I know most of all is that I don't know. I don't know what's right to get out of here. I only know that what is happening is wrong. So wrong. I told you my dad had to leave Egypt because of his um because of his beliefs. He never got to see his father again because he died while he was away. Um, but he was able to go home when they made peace. He was able to go home, and he took us. And we have had the chance to go and to know his family and to know a little bit of that place because they were able to make peace. And there are so many people who've been waiting to go home, but there's been no way to make peace. And so they cannot go home. And a lot of them in the last couple days have lost the homes that they had. Because most of the people in Gaza are refugees or descendants of refugees because who had already lost their family home. And I think that's harder for us in the West to understand because we move so readily and we don't live where our grandparents and great grandparents built homes. But they did. And then they were taken. It wasn't a choice to leave. And they didn't get to take their investments and buy a new home. So like they just were pushed out. It was a disaster. And it's happening, what is happening now is a catastrophe. And yet the people on the other side of the fence, a lot of them, they lost their grandparents' homes and their grandparents and everything. And as I said, in some ways, it is so very, very, very simple. They're bombing children. It needs to stop. And in other ways, it's very, very complicated. Because do how do they go from here? It's hard sometimes to love this species, but it's the only one we have. It's the only one we belong to. Um, and I do believe this is the only world and the only life we have. So we have to try and love it, and we have to try and see each other. So when you hear people say that all Arabs are terrorists, think about my dad who gave up his country because he didn't want to fight, because he believes in do no harm. And think of the doctors who stayed in the hospital in Gaza City while it was being bombed. And the Red Crescent workers who chose not to evacuate so that people wouldn't die alone. When someone tells you that Arabs are animals, and the Palestinians are animals, those are not the actions of animals. Those are not the actions of terrorists. I'm sorry, friends, for the dark video. I had planned something fun for October, but um, this is what I have in me now. So thanks for your support. And more than that, go support Gaza. Go donate and lend your voices and just write to your prime minister, your write to whoever, because there has to be a way to stop. We can't just there has to be a way to stop. And even if there isn't, we have to keep working till there is till there is no work left. Care for yourself, but keep working.